Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're still continuing with our discussion about Michael Bruce Ross, known as the Eggman or the Roadside Strangler. In 1981, he launched a major crime spree, which included multiple rapes, which would eventually go on to murders. He murdered 8 women, raping 7 of them, and he attacked another woman who was one woman just whose account has not been completely proven yet. Is one of the alleged accounts. But of course, Michael Bruce Ross was involved with small amounts of crime and stalking prior to becoming a rapist and murderer. I mean, he definitely developed stalking at a much earlier age. And this is part 2 of the discussion, but if we want to continue, I mean, hopefully, if you're just jumping right in now, I want just to leave it at that. You don't have to go back and listen to part 1, because we're going to talk about a few very important things with Michael Bruce Ross. It's like, there's always the same with these serial killer types and these serial rapist types. This is a slow build-up. Very few of them really seem to just kind of jump right into a massive amount of high-profile crimes. They don't jump right into the serial killing and to the serial rapist mode. They have a series of destructive actions in their life that build up to this. And in the particular case of Michael Bruce Ross, it was stalking. Why does this happen? Well, in terms of just how the person is developing, their crimes get more and more extreme, and they also learn how to hide the ability. They have the ability to just hide this type of dark behavior, this type of destructive behavior, so people in the general public would never suspect them. And, we've listed countless examples: Robert Hansen, Albert Fish, and of course Ted Bundy. There are a lot of comparisons to Ted Bundy, and I think one of the reasons why Michael Bruce Ross is not as famous as Ted Bundy is just Ted Bundy was so much more prolific and so much more kind of boisterous and profound. It's like, I mean, they even list their IQs. Michael Bruce Ross had an IQ of 122. Ted Bundy had an IQ of 136. Ted Bundy defended himself at his trial. I mean, he could deal with bigger body count, and just Ted Bundy was more articulate and more charismatic. And it's like some of the people even describe Michael Bruce Ross as a likable figure, and this is very frustrating. For part 1, I mentioned that I've been trying this thing where I was mostly just trying to read the written sources about cases, because I thought that'd be an interesting way to learn, staying away from some of the documentaries. And then I decided, hey, whatever, let's just watch some of the documentary episodes that they have about Michael Bruce Ross. And I was reminded why I started reading the stuff as opposed to watching these things, because I was watching the kind of an episode on him, and it was so frustrating, because it's like, they're just like, oh, he's a likable guy, and in reality I was just like, no, he isn't. And I'm not talking about all the horrible things he did. I'm talking about when they're interviewing him, he's like a horribly disgusting personality. It's just slimy, and thinks he's some brilliant manipulator, and he's just kind of gloating in it. He's just using this as a chance to stand in the spotlight, to showboat. Very arrogant and condescending personality, meaning he's talking down to the people in the audience, but definitely using this to just act like a showboat. And I didn't find him a likable character at all, and it's not like he was some sort of a massively persuasive personality, unless you want to sort of entertain that thing where it's like they think that they're just this brilliantly persuasive individual, but in reality it's just a complete ruse, because they persuade no one. But other people that were commenting on the that particular documentary said something quite to the contrary. Alright, so we've covered the basics, right? He was a serial rapist. He started the rapes and murders in 1981, murdering 8 women. 7 of them were raped, and we also have the other alleged encounter that could have taken place. Not to mention stalking women prior to that, learning how to kind of conceal things from his traumatic childhood. Very well-educated person. I mean, even at the time, when he's committing murders, he had a fiancée. It's like, once again, it's not just about, looking for something in your life. It's about not being able to escape the destructive elements in your childhood. Okay? People like Michael Bruce Ross are definitely coming from a pattern of abuse, and this is what we mentioned all in part one about he wasn't able to escape the cycle of destructive behaviors. Well, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? What can we do? And I mentioned one line at the end of the last episode about the answer could be an education. But the thing is, I don't think it's good to just say the answer can be an education if you don't actually give some possible solutions, or some proposed solutions, rather. And when we're going to be combating education, it's like we've talked about, increasing mental awareness education classes in school, like the same way that people have, a high school health class or something. Why isn't there also a high school mental awareness class? And in very specific terms, some people are even talking about teaching meditation and yoga in school, and as just required subjects. The problem is, though, I think those things often have a spiritual connotation, and we're really trying to deal with separation of state and house of worship in the United States of America. But if you want to just approach yoga from a sort of secular standpoint, a lot of people are going to listen. Not to mention, it's just more about kind of people should be provided with information regularly on how to deal with things like being angry, frustrated, and rejected from society. And the problem is, though, our sort of things like guidance counselors, they often exacerbate the situation. There's that book, The Secret, out there, got turned into a documentary as well. The documentary might still be on Netflix, actually. And what The Secret is saying is just, that if you focus on the problem too much, you're just going to keep repeating the problem. If you focus and keep talking about the thing that's bothering you, it's going to keep bothering you. You need to focus on the thing that you actually want, and that you need to be talking about the thing that you actually want. And, that's like a very, very small introduction to The Secret. And they also talk about how your thoughts emit frequencies, and that can attract things to you. And we can't really go down that road too much. But if you just look at that very simple statement that we just laid out right now, it's like with somebody like Michael Bruce Ross, he had none of the things that we're talking about. No mental awareness education, no resources to how to deal with abuse. I mean, very physically abused by his mother. His mother was institutionalized, his uncle committed suicide, and he had to take on his uncle's job on the farm, slaughtering deformed chickens. And that's how he got the sort of nickname and the pseudonym, the Eggman. But it's like, he didn't have any of those resources. And it's like we really just need to kind of have people that are kind of going to be designing our education system that are going to be focused on how do we bring these types of positive elements as opposed to the negative ones. People are going to be focusing on the solution, not just keep talking about the problem, not just keep talking about, okay, this is what depression is, because that's what they often do in this type of educational system. They say that this is what depression is, this is like what a mental illness is, and they just keep giving those things. And then they say, oh yeah, by the way, if you ever have thoughts to hurt yourself, call 911. And it's just like, let alone that can be very intimidating for people. And I don't think having something like that would have been the answer to Michael Bruce Ross. I mean, because once again, it's just like, it's a very intimidating and not very conducive and supportive. It's not a very supportive system. It's more just kind of making people feel awkward. And also, it's telling them that they have the problem. Even the concept of saying, oh, you have a mental illness, but that's okay. You can learn how to fix it. I mean, when you sort of promote things like that, as the way they do in education, K through 12 does, it's like you're kind of just trying to differentiate people, and as opposed to just finding the resources. I mean, perhaps there could be something out there environmentally that is wrong with this person. And if we correct the environmental issue that's wrong with them, their quality of life will improve. As well as just having the ability to deal with things like bad memories and not being able to deal with the effects of abuse. And that's where the mindfulness education comes from. Remember, mindfulness, being aware of your own mind, learning the strategies about what you need to do when you have bad memories that you can't get rid of, when you have post-traumatic stress. Those are the things that we can do. If we can incorporate those things into a type of curriculum, and every person who's graduating high school would need to go through some sort of class like that. One of the other things that you kind of drift away from the sort of mental awareness thing is just why don't schools just have more of just a time for creativity? And this isn't exactly a possibility that would have helped somebody like Michael Bruce Ross, but it could have effects on our education system overall. It's like creativity. It's like if you even just had like 2 hours on Friday afternoon in like your elementary school, and we're just like, this is creative time. You can do anything you want with anything in the room, as long as you're not disturbing somebody else, and you can just create something. And creativity, we're saying that because some people are good at painting, some people are good with building blocks, other people are good at writing stories. And it's like, that's a big thing, though, that's also, you really notice in our early years. It's like, if you're not an artist for the years of K1, 2, and 3, people think there's something wrong with you. Oh, he's not coloring inside the lines. Oh, he must not be intelligent or something like that. I mean, that's the sort of impact it's left upon you. But the fact of the matter is, that's not even a choice at that point. It's just, people have different neurological functions and different types of neurological development. So it's like, if you just have creative time, you can just compose something. To an extent, we had a little bit of that, at least in my sort of, growing up in West Virginia and Maryland, we had things like that. But on the national level, it's definitely lacking. And there are things that you can also expand. Okay, so we talked about a lot of things: mental awareness education, revamping the way that counselors approach the system, creativity in schools. It's just, we can't only be like, we need change, but we don't say anything about what the possible changes could be. When you're looking at a guy like Michael Bruce Ross, who was very well educated, once again, he got a fiance named Connie. He achieved a lot of the things that he was trying to break out of, but by his own admission in the interviews, he's saying that it was just building up, and it's like if he saw a woman in a vulnerable place, that was the trigger. It's like, some of this is conditioning, but it's also just his life was a recipe for disaster. It's like he had the abuse, but he didn't have a way to deal with it. And we need more solutions about ways to deal with things. We also can have more things like perhaps counseling hotlines, not crisis hotlines. They have plenty of those, but people that you can actually talk to over the phone regularly. Or we also have things on like webcams and internet and those things that you can, if they're just more easily available, and the students have more of the resources to deal with those things, because that could be also something else. But with the thing with Michael Ross is that by the time he was caught, and when he's in these interviews, it's like, just he seems like a very rude personality. And we mentioned in the last time, after reading an article about him, that he became somewhat of a model inmate. He converted to Catholicism, and he was helping other inmates in prison. After watching him in interviews, I'm like, wow, is that really the case? Or is he just trying to fool people once again? Oh, look at me, I'm a good person now. And just based on the level of arrogance that he had when he's talking about murdering women, and raping women, and it's like the level of arrogance that he had. It was like, I don't really know if I should believe anything that he's saying, or if you should believe any of the accounts that he actually became rehabilitated, or is he just putting on an act because, once again, he thinks he's this master persuader and he can get people to kind of believe him. It's that whole thing about, oh, I'm smarter than you, I don't have to care about you, I can just say a bunch of cheap lines and you're just going to go along with it because I'm more intelligent. That type of thinking and that type of behavior. Well, this is kind of part 2 on our discussion about Michael Bruce Ross. Once again, it's a tragic situation. It's a story of abuse that got out of control. But the thing is, we just have to look forward to the future and focus on the sort of solutions that we want to put in place. I want to hear from you. What do you think would be good solutions about how we can kind of confront the system and find ways that we can make these problems occur less frequently? What do you think could be some answers to the problems about how do we deal with things like people who come from abusive backgrounds and avoid the cycle of destructive behaviors? If you have anything to say at all, I would love to hear from you, and until next time.